Sarah Gaventa is director of the Illuminated River Foundation, a project creating the longest artwork in the world. It involves lighting bridges right across central London. 4 of them have already been completed, with 5 more on track for spring this year. Sarah was the government advisor on public space as director of CABE Space at the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment before it was closed down in 2011. A few years ago, she curated Out There, an exhibition on post-war public art for historic England at Somerset House. So, Sarah, what distinguishes the Illuminated River as a work of art rather than a public lighting project?
That's a very good question. And I think the obvious answer is that we're working with an artist. We're working with an artist who is renowned for his light sculptures. And I think it's an artwork in terms of the way that the vision of the artist is relayed onto the bridges. So the bridges become the canvases for the artwork. Leo Villareal has a long track record of producing large-scale public light sculptures, and the most obvious being the Bay Lights in San Francisco. And I suppose the other reason why it's art is it's very much about painting with light. So therefore he has these special computer programs. So he's like an impressionist painter, but he has a laptop with a software program of random programming that creates this kinetic artwork, which is always constantly changing. And also it's the artist's eye. I think that's what makes it an artwork, is that it's about subtlety. It's about enhancing what's there. It's very much, not that a lighting designer wouldn't do that as well, but it's a very painterly artistic approach to the bridges. And in a way, it's about creating something which has a story, so that it's responding very much to its environment. So like any artist, he's inspired by what he sees and the environment around it. And in an unusual way, is an artwork that can adapt over time, because he's an artist who works with computer software, and the environment is always changing in London, as we know, with new buildings going up and different lights, etc. Is he can come back over time and tweak that artwork. By saying it's kinetic, it makes it sound like it's something that's sort of a light show, and it's not. It's still remarkably subtle. You really have to go and see it. So it's something that takes, well, it's taken years to create, and he works in his studio with models in a way that an artist would in many ways, and then will then come down and actually create the final artwork on site.
So quite technical, isn't it? You've got a big team of architects and lighting engineers installing it.
Oh gosh, yes, it's well, like all art, it's not always created just by an artist. I mean, we have Lifshitz, Davis and Sandilands, who are the architects of Golden Jubilee Footbridge, which is one of the bridges as part of the project, who are their sort of lead consultants. So they were part of the winning team along with Leo and Atelier 10, who are our lighting designers and engineers, who, in a way, they're translating Leo's vision into something that's very practical. And then we have Conways, who have done this amazing job at installing it as well, because the worst place you could probably work is on a bridge, well, especially a railway one, over a working river when you have tideway coming underneath as well. It's been a very interesting canvas to work on.
The Thames in London is a great open space for the city, but it's not an easy one to engage with. I mean, what more do you think should be done to make it an enjoyable public space, if anything at all?
Heaps, I think, Peter. I mean, I've learned so much about, well, first of all, you have to find it. You can come out of London Bridge Station and you can be one street away from the river, but you can't see it. So it's there, but it's not there. Then we've spent decades building right up against it, so that the walking path means that on the north bank between Millennium and Tower Bridge, you have to basically go up into a sort of Robert Moses sort of inspired sort of freeway and away from the river. There's lots of ownership issues. I mean, it is our, it's a big, instead of a green space, it's a blue space. It's in fact our biggest space. Well, you might call it a public space in London, but you can't go on it for free unless you fall in, because you have to pay either to commute or go on a tour. And this lack of accessibility and the lack of relationship we have with the Thames even though we're Londoners, is extraordinary. I mean, 1 in 10 children in central London have never seen it. And that's particularly true of children in Westminster, of all places, because you've got the Houses of Parliament and other buildings right close up to the Thames. So the access is incredibly limited unless you're going across a bridge. So one of the things we did when we looked at this, I mean, it's actually a social justice issue, was look at how we could provide free boat tours for local communities and work with local schools to encourage them to talk to their parents about going down to the Thames, because it's the one place where you can actually have these incredibly, unless you're on top of Primrose Hill, these incredibly long views and fresh air. It's the most COVID friendly place to be, really. You've got the space. So we also are running boat tours that are the same price as commuting, and looking at other ways that we can bring other communities from other boroughs in London to the Thames. I mean, it feels extraordinary that the whole reason that London is here is because of the river, and yet we are not, we don't engage with it. And younger people are less interested in it in terms of the history. And yet I think by creating an artwork on the river, we have found that that's brought different communities down. So in a way, Illuminated River is a reason to go and see the bridges and then realize, oh my God, the Thames is a really amazing place, and especially at night. And because of the way the light reflects onto the water, not directly, but no direct light, but just reflects, you notice the change of the tide, so that, this is a wildlife superhighway as well. There's over 150 species of fish. You just can't see them. And it travels at 12 miles an hour, and has 2 tides a day. Yeah, I've learned an awful lot about the Thames. I'm a Thames boy. So it's extraordinary, this resource that we have, which we don't have the access to that we really should.
Now, one of the things, it does seem to be generally agreed that one of the outcomes of the pandemic is that cities will need to pay more attention to public open space. Clearly, your experience of CABE is very important in that. So are you optimistic that this will make a sort of long-term positive difference to our cities?
I think only if the public demand it, because I mean, from my days at CABE, the big disadvantage for green space or public spaces, they're not a statutory service within a local authority, so they don't get core funding. I mean, what the pandemic showed is that we are reliant on the NHS, and also our parks are like our natural health service, so we need them both. So I think it's shown what the true heroes are, and our spaces have worked so hard, but we need them to be fantastic in the worst of times as much as the best of times. The pandemic has really, I think, concentrated people's attention on them in a way that is really important. So just in the way that so many private spaces were turned into public spaces because the public lobbied for them in the Victorian period, so I would like to see the public lobby for our parks and green spaces to be protected.
Well, I think that the Mayor of London is doing his bit, because he's recently published the Public London Charter, which is a supplement to the new London Plan. And his aim is to ensure that London's public spaces are safe, accessible, inclusive, attractive, well connected, and easy to understand. Have you had a look at his proposals, and what do you think of them?
Oh yes, no, I have, and I actually was on a BBC London talking about it in a POP, privately owned public space, with the presenter when it took 3 minutes before we were asked to leave, because that's not part of being inclusive and accessible. The principles are really important because it's also about saying they're for everyone. I also remember judging New Street Square and watching whilst a security guard, and this is another thing, we don't need security guards, we need stewards, and we need the parkies for urban spaces, not security guards. And the security guard came along and he saw 2 workers in overalls and asked them to leave because it was a white collar space, and also he didn't win a prize. But it's all about the attitude, isn't it? And so the principles that the mayor has set out, they're about just, it's for homeless people, white collar people, anyone, children, for heaven's sake, teenagers. And it's about a sense of generosity. And I think the really important thing is that we need landowners to sign up to it, because actually it's very much steered towards privately owned public spaces and saying you need to be part of a wider network. You need to think about the communities around you. It can't just be a whole series of sort of paid events in there. You know, it's not a venue for those with a lot of money. And you shouldn't have a default approach, which is, how do I keep people out? It should be, how do you welcome people? And again, if you have the people who clean the space or manage the space, looking after it, instead of security guards who are talking to people and encouraging people to use it, people look after it a lot better themselves, you know, in terms of self-policing. So it's incredibly sensible. What I'd like to see is to make sure that it's in planning, and that it's a condition, and I think that's going to happen, and then people are held to account, so that everywhere there is a sign saying whether they're signed up to it or not, and if they're not, then people should lobby for that, and if people aren't, the owners aren't adhering to it, then again they should be held to account. I don't know what you do about retrospective spaces, but again, I think it is the next stage is obviously getting everyone to sign up for it. I mean, whenever I've done a lot of consulting for developers, and I always say to them, think about a space you'd like to be in. If you create it for yourself, I mean, then it will be great for everyone. Don't start by thinking, well, it's got to be low maintenance and we've got to stop these groups of people, we've got to stop that, because you will create something that is useless for everybody. And that's not what we want. So it's about a change of approach and attitude. So it's a really good start.
And I suppose better for the mayor now that he's moving out of more London, because one of the things that always happened when people were interviewed outside City Hall was that they would be quickly moved on by security guards. But I guess now he's moving to the Royal Docks. He'll have his own place there, and he'll be able to be interviewed as much as he likes.
Well, I have to say, I've been to the Crystal and I've walked around the public realm there, and boy, does that need a bit of work in terms of creating a user-friendly space. You know, I mean, the biggest thing for me, just, you know, as a gesture would be, let's just have seats in all of these spaces that you can lie down on. Why is that such a crime, you know? It's not just a homeless person who wants to lie down, and what's wrong with that anyway? It's like, why don't you, you know, you just want to lie down in the sun and enjoy it. I've seen people in Spitalfields in the market being moved on because they dare to lie down on a bench. In a way, I'd like to see another charter that says these are the things we'd love to see happen, you know, which is exactly that you can lie down in the space, that there's a mobile library, all the things. Remember, Peter, when we did Never Mind the Bollards show, and I remember a homeless person tweeted, I was quite impressed that homeless people tweet, he said it was the space that he felt most comfortable in London. And that's because we had lovely wooden seats that you could lie down on. There was a little library, wasn't there? The seats were positioned so you got the most of the sun. There was nobody coming along telling you what to do and what you couldn't do. That's all we ask, really, to be left alone, to have a nice time.
Sarah, thank you very much. I think one of the things about your bridge project is that, of course, it will attract more people to London once they're able to fly here. So it'd be a very positive thing in London's economic recovery in the years to come. So thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Lovely to talk to you.